All right. Welcome, everyone, to the top 5 things every camp leader needs to know about supporting neurodiverse campers. And I subtitled or nicknamed this presentation Giving Unicorns Wings. This population, they are a minority in the world, neurodiverse children, and they're atypical. They're very unique as a group and also individually. But with the things I'm going to share, they'll be able to soar. So we can give them wings. And this is both a unicorn and a Pegasus. So what could be better? I am the founder of Camp Pegasus. So let me do a brief introduction of who I am and my work. And so let's overview what we're going to talk about today. So first, we're going to start with the groundwork. I'm not going to overtalk theory in the beginning. That's one critical error. So what is neurodiversity and neurodivergence? We're going to define terms so we're all on the same page. And then I want to talk about some subtle and not so subtle discrimination that this population faces in their entire lives and how we can dismantle that and undo that as a camp industry and community. And then I want to get into a few of the strategies that I've innovated over the years. So the ARCH system is one, which is sort of a holistic, sort of comprehensive way to both support neurodiverse kids, provide them a sense of real appreciation for who they are, not just acceptance, but appreciation. And then, oh, by the way, it also happens to really empower them and motivate them to practice and practice social skills until they become habits. We're also going to talk about 7 affordable and proactive structure strategies that you can, teach your staff right from the jump. Really, right from staff training, they're affordable. They're not necessarily hard. With a little forethought, you can create structures that help neurodiverse campers succeed at camp. And then finally, I'm going to touch on this framework that I developed in with my therapy clients. Well, I'll describe that in a moment. About understanding 4 levels of frustration, because each level is not created differently. And if we intervene and try to support a child with a mismatched support strategy, that's when we actually unwittingly, out of our big caring hearts, we can escalate the child to higher levels of anger and meltdowns. So we're going to talk about 4 levels of frustration, help you get a sense of that. All right. And so that is our mission today. I am the person who is going to monitor the chat, got sick and is not able to join us. So I'm going to be doing double duty and multitasking. So by way of brief introduction, who is the speaker? Why am I talking to you about this stuff? So my name is Mike Fogel. I'm an art therapist, and I'm a licensed professional counselor in Pennsylvania. And I've been practicing for 29 years, the last 24 in private practice. And so in the year 2000, kids started appearing in my office who had autism. But at the time, it was Asperger's syndrome. So very bright, verbal kids who were out trying to navigate their world and struggling. So they came to my office. I didn't know how to treat them because when I was in graduate school, there was no diagnosis of Asperger's, and there was no such thing at the time as the autism spectrum. It was not known or labeled. So therefore, without that naming of it and without the awareness, there was nothing. So then kids start appearing in my office. I don't know what's happening. I'm doing friendship groups, but I have 2 little girls meowing under the table. I couldn't get them to be, big humans with us. And I tried every trick in my psychological book and couldn't get them to become humans with the other girls at the table. And I thought, I need to learn about this population. Who are they? What do they need? And that's what gave birth to ultimately the Art of Friendship social coping program. So I've been doing social skills groups since 2000. And then about 7 years after that, I left a group psychology practice to form my own therapy practice, where half the time we're doing individual therapy at the Child and Family Art Therapy Center. We launched that in 2007, bringing in the art of friendship as one of our key services. And then, having done social skills therapy for 13 years, we were seeing so many clients in our offices who were struggling at camps. They were getting kicked out of camps, or they were developing tremendous camp anxiety for day camps. And they were getting into these power struggles with parents, like, no, don't miss that, don't send me to that horrible place. And so with all the therapy that we were doing around camps, it was really clear that there needed to be kind of a full service therapeutic social skills day camp that understood the needs of children with autism, ADHD, and learning differences. And so that led to the formation of Camp Pegasus, which we ran. It was a day camp. By the last several years, we averaged 150 kids. And so working with the children and their parents in this live camp setting really got to see a lot of the challenges and the unbelievable growth that can happen in a camp setting that's focused on social skills. And so that is what I'm bringing to the table. I'm moving into a phase where I am now doing a lot of training and consultation. So camp consultation, and I'll talk about that later. And all that experience led me at the 20-year anniversary of my practice of my social skills group to write a book. It's the Social Emotional Guidebook. I'll have this slide up at the end as well. And some of the strategies that I talk about today are excerpted from the book. This is a how-to manual of how do you create the ideal support environment and an environment that motivates the neurodiverse child to practice and repeat social skills until they become habits. So that's the purpose of the book. And here's some of the magical moments of Camp Pegasus. One feature of which was direct instruction in a social skill. You can see on the bottom left, there I am teaching social skills to a whole group, and I had one volunteer with me at the time. And that was a wacky Wednesday dress up day, so I was the Flash. So I was teaching very fast that day. All right. So now we're going to get right into the content. So thing one of 5 things that you really need to keep in mind and to know in terms of supporting neurodiverse campers is what is neurodiversity and what is neurodivergence. Okay, so I have these 2 definitions I pulled right from the web, from dictionary.com, neurodivergent and neurodiversity. And sometimes these terms are used somewhat interchangeably. And let's hide that. Okay. And so when they're interchangeably used, but the main point is neurodivergent means, okay, neuro means brain, and divergent means they're diverging. They're different than. But what are they different than? So this is a term that's used, really speaking about, or it was originated for sort of the autism spectrum. And it talks about how their brains are wired differently than the average kind of mainstream mind. And so neurodivergent, sort of the opposite of that is neurotypical. So the average kind of mainstream processor, the mainstream child who has sort of inferential learning of social skills, they're neurotypical. And then the child who's neurodivergent is someone on the spectrum, but also now it's considered to include people with ADHD and learning differences. So all those kind of brain-based challenges. Now, and then neurodiversity is a term that just speaks to the wide range of wiring that actually makes up human functioning. And so the neurodiverse population is, again, speaks to all these different diagnoses and different cognitive styles. And so in my book, I coined a term to speak to the experience and some of the challenges that the neurodiverse population face as they are entering and trying to navigate the neurotypical world. Neurotypical people aren't aware that there are social rules because they just infer them. And for some reason, it's like the vast percentage of the population seems to inferentially know what to do in certain social situations. Like if you go into an elevator, right, you're the first one there, you turn around, you press the button, you stand there and you're waiting, right? The doors open up on the next floor. Someone else comes on. What do? Most people seem to know, oh, we're going to balance out the space. I'm going to move over here. The other person's going to move over here, roughly balance it, create new space. Then next floor, someone else comes on, the same thing happens again. So there's some sort of inferential unconscious awareness of certain social rules and comforts. But this population don't have that. They're a little bit blind to it. It's a bit of a social learning disability in a way. And so the term I coined is social emotional cognitive challenges because it impacts their social functioning and their emotional functioning, SECCs, and they really overlap. And the populations that most um, that that most appear under this umbrella are autism, ADHD, and learning differences. And now this population, as a result of their experiences, may wind up with secondary diagnoses and challenges such as depression, anxiety, or oppositional defiant disorder. But I would say that those are secondary usually to their experience of being a neurodivergent person in the mainstream neurotypical world. It's hard. Okay. It's hard. Okay. So neurodivergent functioning, they are different than the mainstream population. And so it's a neurological brain-based situation. So this is hardwired. This isn't their fault. Neurodivergence is not because of poor parenting, although, parents and the home situation impact anyone's functioning. But neurodivergence speaks to their brain wiring. And this wiring causes them to misread nonverbal social cues like tone of voice, facial expression, posture. They might be missing those social cues. They misunderstand the unwritten social rules that I mentioned, and so one is, the elevator situation. Another example could very simply be how loud is your voice inside versus outside, right? An indoor speaking voice, and they have weaker use of pragmatic social language. Pragmatic language is the language that humans have come up with to navigate our social situation. So like if two people disagree, you go, well, let's agree to disagree. Two people are brainstorming for something to do for a group project or a game. They disagree. Well, come on, let's work it out. Maybe we can compromise. So just words like maybe we can compromise might not come up for the neurodivergent camper. They might not know what to say to get into those modes, even if they had the mental capacity to do it. So weaker pragmatic language. And then the fourth bullet point is executive functioning and impulse control. And that's sort of the ADHD suite of functioning, right? Impulse control, acting before thinking. And if you're impulsive, then you sort of do things before your mind can even catch up and realize, oh, that might hurt his feelings. That might not work for me. Right. So those are four just of the sort of most prevalent bullet pointed aspects of their functioning that really impacts how they engage in your bunks at your camp. They are often high in atypicality, which is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a great strength because my clients and campers on the spectrum and with ADHD, they're often really incredible problem solvers. They have these outside the box thoughts, interesting different perspectives on things, very creative. Love that. But then also, that very different thinking sets them apart from the neurotypical average child, and then they can look different. Some kids will call that weird. It's a weird thing to do because it's unexpected, it's out of the norm. And so there's this high in atypicality piece, which we should keep in mind. It's a high stress existence, actually. And so sometimes it's labeled anxiety, but it's not always necessarily phobia anxiety, like phobic anxiety, like I'm afraid of spiders, although that certainly can be true too. But my neurodivergent campers and clients sort of walk around the world with a buzz of tension, and I think it comes from a sense of, I'm not sure if I can handle the next thing that comes around the corner. I'm not sure if I can handle my feelings, and so there's just a little bit of this insecurity and feeling unsure, and that walking around the world with that level of sort of stress or anxiety, if you call it that, um, can make them a little more brittle emotionally also. What's going to happen next? So that can make them have more emotional flares, and it's also exhausting. They really can be have fatigue from doing social all day. So we'll talk about that as one of my recommendations, actually. So high stress existence, and the last bullet point on this slide is key for this talk. They're quite often, more often than not, in a negative feedback loop with the world. And just really simply, my campers and clients come to us often really stressed out, really nervous about going to a camp because of bad camp experiences, or just the entire 10 months of this 9, 10 months of the school year, really stressed out because here's what they get from teachers. Johnny, back in your seat. Get back in your seat. Johnny, back in your seat. That was inappropriate. Say you're sorry. Inappropriate. Not okay. Say you're sorry. So a lot of this perpendicular correction is what I call it. Very direct correction because it's speedy, it's fast, and sort of gets the job done in terms of, from sort of a control and containment standpoint, getting a class back on track. They also get this at home for the same reason. And so there's all this correction from adults that can grind a child's confidence and self-esteem. And on the social side with peers, so a lot of the feedback that they receive is stop, leave me alone, stop, you're bothering me, you're so weird, why did you do that? So they get this kind of feedback from kids, all of which contributes to that high stress existence, the anxiety, and also they might feel like I'm different, I don't fit in. And this is the reason that I'm here talking to you today for my position as someone who's worked with this population in therapy and at camp for all those years. So that's your baseline. Now you have empathy for the lived experience of your neurodiverse campers. So now let's get into what is ableism. Let's talk about this negative feedback cycle. I've been aware of this negative feedback cycle for years, honestly. And then only in the last few years, it's really become clear to me that it's a form of ableism. So we'll talk about this. It's a form of discrimination. So these are the negative feedback cycles that I mentioned from teachers, peers, caregivers, some camp staff, not yours, not you. No. Um, but and this can come from the most caring people. This is sort of a microaggression of sorts. It's not on purpose. It's just if people are not aware of the needs of the population, why they're doing these things and what they need, that's when we just fall into this sort of corrective cycle. And ableism is sort of defined as, again, sort of for the people who function differently, the mainstream population expect everyone to be able to participate in this mainstream way. There's just sort of like a little bit of blinders on about that. Veil. It's sort of a parallel to sort of white privilege. It's able-bodied privilege because we don't have to think about, if you're neurotypical, you don't really have to think actively all day long. How do I do this? How do I move through this setting or that setting? But this population does. And with this negative cycle that I mentioned, our campers are in a way expected to participate like all other kids. And then when they don't, what do? We revert to sort of our instinct of how to do it, how to handle it. And that's what the negative cycle is. And I believe that that's actually a form of ableism. And interestingly, for someone who is in a wheelchair, for instance, or if they have a guide dog, if they're blind or if they have an obvious, gait difference, like a major limp or some other sort of different walking style, you can see that there's a disability. And okay, so people, show concern, but even in those situations, they might experience ableism. And you can see from my little image here with some of these kind of questions, which are like microaggressions. But this population, the neurodiverse population, they have invisible disabilities. They often look like an average kid. Very often, they're adorable, handsome, charming looking kids. And so that further confuses their peers for sure, but also adults. Well, I'm expecting you to act like everyone else, but here you go acting different again. Why can't you just act like everyone else? And so this I think fuels that negative cycle. So what I'm going to share the rest of the time is how can we dismantle this negative cycle and create positive cycles instead? Okay. So first, one big takeaway I want you to have is it is not their fault. This is their wiring. Again, this is how their brain's wired. They came out of the chute this way. They simply don't know how to do social. So if you see a social miscue, let's assume that this child has a heart of gold for the most part, almost, I would say almost all my clients do and campers, but they don't know how to do it. So it's a miscue. They're missing some understanding of the social situation or what to do. And in my view, I think there's a moral imperative as a society for us to get this right for them. So today you're going to learn a method to make learning social and coping skills safe, fun, and comfy. Okay, so instead of those negative cycles, we want to create positive cycles that feature acceptance, patience because they can't help it. Let's find a little more patience for some of the behaviors. Uh, a skill building approach. We want this to be an educational model, not a control and containment model. Sit down, be quiet, behave, right? That's that perpendicular coaching. That's what gets people into that mindset. But if we see everything as a skill building opportunity, whoa, that opens us up to all sorts of different interactions with our campers. Okay, so we want to reinforce positive moments. And then when it's time to correct, I want to share with you a compassionate way to coach social miscues. All right, so we're gonna point to that today as well, right? Just creating the positive cycles to dismantle the ableism. And so essentially, the bottom yellow is we're going to accept who this child is exactly for who they are today in the moment, and with a hopeful eye for the future that they'll learn what they need to learn, so the next time they're in a similar situation, they can better handle it. That's our job, right? And so here's another. I just love the image of this slide: the angel wrapping their wings around the children, and so can read the white, but neurodiverse folks with social, emotional, cognitive challenges need more structure and more clarity, more clear structure than the neurotypical child. They need success-oriented social practice opportunities with peers, and that's camp. All day long, it's social. There's really not the academic piece, that performance piece that they have at school. It's all social all the time. Camp is a social skills group all day. And so how can we make it success oriented? More on that in a moment. They need positive reinforcement cycles to replace the negative ones. Let's interrupt those cycles. And then we need the compassionate social coaching for miscues. All right, so that's what we're going to dive into starting now. So here's thing number 3 that you need to know as a camp leader. And I'm going to share with you sort of the outline of my A.R.C.H system, A.R.C.H system for social skills support and training. Okay, and so the A.R.C.H method, and I like this image because it's an acronym, but also the A.R.C.H, it sort of like creates an umbrella, right? It envelops, it sort of covers all this ground, wrapping around a neurodiverse child's functioning around their world. And so here's the A.R.C.H method. We're going to be able to talk a little bit about some of these features today. So A.R.C.H, the A is anticipate and teach. So structure, remember, structure was one of the first things I mentioned a minute ago. So they need structure. So before the child's even engaging with your program and with the other campers, let's create some structures proactively so that we're going to create some armature and some understanding for the child of what's expected that'll decrease anxiety, it'll decrease stress and acting out. And then also social skill building. Remember, because if the child has social challenges because they don't understand what's socially expected and they don't know what to do, right? Pragmatic language, they don't know what to say necessarily. Well, let's teach them. So let's get our minds ready for that. So anticipate and teach is the A. Now the R and the C really come into play when your campers are at camp interacting. Now they're doing childhood and life is their social skills group. So we want to reinforce and reward. These are the positive cycles. So we're going to reinforce and reward their social behaviors so that we get them repeating and repeating positive social cues, social skills until they become habits, which is mastery. And then the R is on the back end because the C is the R is the positivity, reinforcing and motivating them to repeat. And the C is what we do on the back end when the camper has a social miscue. There's a mess up, there's a conflict, there are big feelings. How do we talk about it with them in a way that doesn't grind their spirit to a pulp? So that's the C in compassionate social coaching. And finally, H is a holding environment. So we want to sort of almost like a bird's nest, holds baby birds in place, swaddling for a baby. We want to hold them. And there's a certain way to hold their feelings. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today, too. All right, so let's get into the A of it all. We're going to anticipate and teach, and I'm really going to focus most on the structure. That's one of the things that I promised in the course description. Structure, structure, structure. And we're going to talk about how you can reinforce things. So 7 affordable structuring strategies to plan in staff training. You could throw all of these at campers if you wanted to, and that would really be sort of blanketing, flooding the zone, blanketing all their needs. And also, you could pick and choose. If you already do some of these, but maybe you want to pick one to really focus on this year, so you do what makes the most sense for your program, your campers. And one more note before I get into content. There's this idea that, okay, there's someone with disabilities and they need accommodations. So, okay, we're going to give you the 2 neurodiverse kids out of 12 in a bunk. You're going to get this special treatment, this special support, but that really singles them out, right? The things that I'm sharing are so universal. You could do this for the entire bunk. So it's called universal design. So you design it for the people that need it, but it's appropriate for everyone. And in fact, it'll float all boats. All campers will really thrive if you made this sort of a bunk-wide or even camp-wide culture. And I certainly am living proof of that. We did that at Camp Pegasus to really powerful results. And so structures, we're going to make these neurodiverse brains feel invited and comfy. We're going to help them organize. And so number one answer on the board, going visual with schedules. In our camps, we had lanyards. Everyone had their name tag because a lot of campers just with neurodiverse campers cannot remember a name. So this way they always had access to each other's names. On the back, everyone had a mini bunk schedule. And so they could follow along. What do we have next? Without this, we had campers turning to staff all day long. What's next? What do we have next? What time is it? When is this over? And so once we had this, counselors could say, check your schedule, super quick, and it allows the camper to be independent. You can also post something like this in each activity room. If there's an activity that's sort of indoors where there's walls, you can post, what do we do first, second, third? Is there a check-in? Is there a warm-up? And then we get into something. The more you help their minds know what's coming in time and space, the less anxiety they'll have. They'll settle more, and then they can engage better. So number one, going visual with schedules when possible, and alerting them. This population is really sensitive to change because they get a little bit lost in time and space organizing themselves. They really count on schedules and regularity. So if there's going to be a change in the schedule, I strongly, strongly recommend that you give them any kind of advance notice. In our programs, there's advance notice for every activity. 5 minutes left, 2 minutes left, everyone. Get your minds ready. We're going to talk about get your minds ready later. So visual schedules. In a related story, task checklists, especially if you are at a residential camp and you have, there's bunk cleanup or there are bathroom routines. A lot of campers who are neurodiverse with, again, any of these SECCs across ADHD, autism, and learning differences, they might have a hard time remembering a sequence. What do I do next? If you can make it a visual, laminate it so it's reusable, you could have a dry erase marker and they could check it off if you wanted to. Or you can just laminate it. If it's in a bathroom, if you have bathroom routines, post it, laminate it so that it lasts, it doesn't get shredded by moisture and humidity. But these, again, organized campers. And so your counselors don't have to be like, Johnny, toothbrushing, right? Bathroom, toothbrush, right? All of those reminders, you might be able to decrease some of that. And on the back end, making sure that you're giving them high fives, hugs if necessary, yeah, way to do it. You cleared your board. You ran the board, whatever language you want to use, and you can gamify it. Campers or your group, your bunk could work towards any kind of benefits, credits, special activities, those kind of things. So it's a fun way to gamify functioning. And so task checklists as well really will help to decrease power struggles and repeated badgering that campers need to get stuff done. Next, notice all the first three are all visual. This population are really known for having very strong sort of like concrete visual skills. Less so observe if there's a field with a lot of activity going on, a lot of like sports, things running, a lot of running around, people moving in space, that can be harder. But for rote, really clear, concrete visual things, this population is known to have a really fabulous memory and fabulous. It really helps them to organize. So any activity where you have can have one of these timers. This is a brand called Time Timer. You can go on Amazon, other online outlets, get them. There's different sizes, so there's different, and they're not necessarily super expensive. You can see there's also an app for it. But going visual, again, time is invisible, right? And so having a visual timer, you set it up, you can show it to the camper. If you want them to take a calming down break, okay, 5 minutes on the clock, right, here you go. They can watch it go down. It helps them to organize, less stress, and also less power struggles because they're able to organize more in time. Number 4, this is, especially if you have, I would say, a special needs day camp, a special needs camp, handheld dry erase boards can decrease the verbal load that kids are processing. This population sometimes can get flooded with language, and language can cross up their processing. It might take them a lot of extra mental energy to hear what you say, process it through, understand it, and then output a response. But you can be like, you can write, line up and hold it up. And then all the campers, they see it. And then it's less mental load. We had a camper who melted down a bunch. And when we would try to engage with her after calming down, just talking about it with her could flare her up. So we could slide one of these dry erase boards to her and say like, ready to talk ? And then, she could just push it away. Or she could, and we would hand her the pen and she could write something hateful if she was really still in tantrum mode, or she could write almost or whatever. So that was a way to decrease the cognitive load that also can stress kids, especially during emotional moments. So an absolute resource for you, not terribly expensive. All right, another structuring agent and some language for it. We want to get their minds ready. So we have this language when there's going to be a transition. If you have, a usual weekly routine, but then you have some special activity on a Friday, right? A juggler's coming in, or there's going to be a trip. In advance, you can say, get your mind ready. I just want to tell our whole group, there's going to be a change in the schedule 2 days from now. So get your minds ready. So you're preparing them. So it's not like this big slap in the face that totally shocks them. It unseats their sense of security of like, oh, I know how the world works. So get your mind ready is a great little bit of language that helps the neurodiverse person sort of rally and get them and prepare themselves for a change. And then, of course, I alluded to earlier, time warnings. If kids are really engaged in an activity and you go, that's it, wrapping it up, then I'm guaranteeing you, many of them are going to have a hard time transitioning off of that thing. And then you have the power struggles, then you have staff saying, come on, come on, come on. Everyone's lining up. But if you prepare their mind in advance, they pre-start the transition process. I'm not saying it works 100% of the time, but compared to the power struggles and meltdowns that happen without it, I highly recommend time warnings before any transition that comes. And I'll do the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I got a mouth buzzer. I use a mouth buzzer. Also, I use timers on my phone, usually with funny sounds like dogs barking or ducks quacking. So that helps with transitions. Number 6 out of the 7 structuring tools for you is to create a positive social culture. And you can call them rules, or these are expectations, but we're selling culture, and the culture is effective socialization. That's what it's about. It's not control and containment. How do we get along really well? How does our group, what is our camp's social culture philosophy, right? What is our bunks? And so these letters, WPP means write, publish, and post. So it's not enough to just say it because words are air. Words are not concrete for this population. In one ear, out the other, they float, and they're not as memorable. So write, publish, and post, you're going to write them down, and it's going to look like something like this. These are our camp rules from Camp Pegasus. Again, we were a day camp for neurodiverse campers. And so we did a ritual reading of the rules every day, every morning in our community meeting that launched the day. And we were like, rule number one. So we did camp, and the kids all said rules, which is fun because, it's double entendre. It's the guidelines, but also camp rules. That's awesome. Rule number one, follow directions. Grown-ups must be in charge. Why? And we'll have a discussion. Why must grown-ups be in charge? Number two, keep your hands and feet to yourself, even if you are, and all the kids scream at us, mad. And then no, hitting, kicking, pushing, biting. Spitting sometimes was added to this list different years, different summers. Use kind words and voices. So we had these, we actually had 8, and I'm just showing you page 1 of these 2 pages of flip charts that we would flip back and forth every day. Go with the flow, do what your group is supposed to be doing. Oops, let me go backwards. And here's how you write a do rule. So you can customize them for you, for your philosophy. I call them do rules because you want to write them in the positive formulation that says what you want to see the child doing or do more of. Okay, and again, do it, create a culture. Don't single out a child. So do follow directions the first time you're asked. Do use your calming strategies. So this is when you're brainstorming, you add the word do in parentheses, but then when you actually publish them, when you WPP them, we take away the word do, and it's in good English. So do follow directions. So that's just a way to help guide you that you're not just writing no rules. Because if you put a rule in the negative, if it's just no, no hitting, well, what's the child going to do instead? Does that make sense? In social skills training, if you just ask someone to stop something, it's going to be hard for them to stop because they don't have something better to do. So that's why we call it do rules. What do we want to see them actually doing? The positive things. Do use kind words and voices. Give compliments and encouragement. And then you can add a no rule, no cursing or insults, but then do use medium indoor voices inside. Name what you want the child to do or the group to do, thinking about the kids in question, your neurodiverse campers. It'll be somewhat easier for the neurotypical kids, but at least you're sharing it with everyone. All right. And number 7, I mentioned that social is fatiguing for this population. Being social for hours upon hours and at overnight camp is practically 24/7. So we really want to keep in mind the need for this population to have time, extra time, to refuel, to recharge their batteries. And they might need breaks throughout the day of quietness, of a little bit of isolation, alone time. You can collaborate with them. You don't have to tell them to do it. But sometimes kids' behavior, if they start to act up, they start to conflict with kids. They might have meltdowns. Some of that is both a loss of control, but also it's a behavioral way to create more space. In the end, they're probably going to be asked to leave or need to leave to go take a break. So let's get ahead of it. Let's not make our campers melt down to get the breaks that they need. We're going to play an escape card. So in our program, every group, every activity room had at least one escape card, photocopied, laminated, put it on, you can hand draw it. It can be creative. You can have your camp's logo on it. It could just be on 3x5 cards, whatever you want to do. Escape cards, they're there. Any camper can play an escape card if they need a break. The height of coping, of personal and individual coping, managing someone's feelings, is if a camper recognizes their own stress, and says, I need a break. They play an escape card, you high five them. All right, let's take you on a break. You might have, if you have a big sprawling campus, maybe there's an outdoor sort of quiet spot to go to. Maybe there's an indoor quieter room where maybe it's cooler to cool off. And there are some calming objects there, perhaps, some sensory items, art, basic drawing materials, just something that really helps that camper settle. So decreasing that social load. So again, so proactively, if a camper says it, that's the height of coping because they self-recognized it and then they asked for it. Awesome. Second best, also really good, is if the counselor or the staff person starts to recognize, oh, the signs, this camper's getting a little agitated. They're starting to get a little argumentative with other peers. That's their sign. You could say, hey, Sam, looks like you might need an escape. Want to take a break? Let's take a break. Boom, hand them the card. And if they can go independently, that's great. They're still managing their stress level, and we're avoiding bigger meltdowns, bigger conflicts. It'll help your bunk function. It'll help them to feel good at camp. And there'll be less back end, big heavy lifting of calming down, all the processing and discussion that happens after big meltdowns and after eruptions, right? So this is your escape card. And you can gamify this. You can add rewards or I don't know, incentives for preferred activities, special group activities if people if the group is using them properly. And now some kids who have social challenges might take advantage of an escape card of a break. And they might be like, ooh, this is my opportunity to have extended one-to-one time with a counselor. Now they're talking and they're telling stories. And so that's where those handheld, a portable visual timer can come into play. If it's on a staff's phone, I don't know if your staff are allowed to have phones. If they do, you can make an exception that they're only allowed to use their phone out for their visual timer, right? Visual timer. Okay, we're going to wind it 5 minutes. Unless a child's melting down, 5 minutes is often enough just to give them a pause. Some kids need longer. You can negotiate that with them. Find out what they need. All right. Okay. So that was the anticipate and teach, and those were 7 structuring opportunities for you. You can think of which ones might work for you and some of your groups. And again, go for universal design. Try to have it be camp-wide or bunk-wide if you have neurodiverse campers. All right, next. I'm going to talk a little bit about the R, C, and the H in the A.R.C.H program. We're going to have a little bit less time for this because each of these is sort of a longer skill module, but I want to start to alert you to the importance of these, and you can start to picture how to use them. We're going to talk about reinforcing TPR, targeted positive reflection, and then there's a possible reward system. So social training. So now you've pre-structured as much as you can. Awesome. Great job by you and your team. Now your campers are on campus and they're being campers. They're being kids. And so now I view staff, teachers, anyone who works with kids as social trainers for everyone. Coming out of COVID, even the neurotypical kids are struggling socially. So you're social trainers. It's a new identity for us. So we're going to toggle all day long between ultra positive reinforcement, the R, and then the C, the compassionate social coaching. So I have a kid's balance scale here, right? So the default is reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. Oh, something goes wrong. We're going to tip the scale. We're going to go into compassionate social coaching and right back to reinforcement, right? So this in your mind. So these are the 2 main functions all day long. And this is where it's your opportunity and your staff's opportunity to turn those negative cycles of ableism positive. Okay. It's super common for any caregiver to accidentally start to focus on negatives because the kid's behavior is blocking, is something goes wrong, someone's upset, there's a conflict, someone's feelings are hurt. Now we have to deal with that. That gets us away from fun. So it's like, come on, let's patch this up really fast. But if we do patch it up fast, then that's when we get into that perpendicular, painful coaching for the kids. So we want to attend to the positive. There's a skill called attending, where you are really starting to observe all these little itty bitty micro behaviors. Everything that a child does requires brain activity. Just when I lifted my hand to point to brain activity, I had brain activity, very meta. That was like, okay, lift right arm, point to my temple. That was a decision, of sort of barely conscious decision, but I did it. And think of all the things that kids do all day. One thing that you can do, again, and you can teach your staff to do this in the off season, if they are around kids now, or you can show a video of kids playing in staff training, let's see if we can notice all the little itty bitty behaviors that a child does and name them. So you become almost like a play-by-play announcer in sports, right? So you're like, okay, I see, Johnny, great job, getting your gear together. We're about to head out of the bunk. All right, and I see, Phil and Larry, the two of you. Yes, you are lining up. You're in the right spot. All right, very good. And I see. All right, so you're sort of naming all these behaviors that when kids are on task. Wow, you were so flexible. You two worked it out. So we're going to start to notice these micro behaviors, and so you want to see it and say it. It's a little bit of a different way of engaging with kids. Usually, it's like we sort of take for granted any positive things that we're expecting them to do, and we then only comment on the negative. So here, we're going to be giving kids credit. I call it catch and credit. We're going to catch them in doing something positive, even little, and naming it. I have so many clients, current and past, who would come into my therapy and say, oh, no one ever tells me, no one ever gives me credit for anything that I do, right? I only get in trouble. This is my neurodiverse population. These are who I work with in our campers. And then they come to our programs and we are catching them and we're crediting them for their contributions. And they're thriving. They just blossom. They show confidence. They're willing to take some more positive social risks. And so we call this TPR, critical skill. This is the skill that undoes ableism and the negative cycle. TPR, okay, targeted positive reflection. I can't say that enough for you. And simply, if I simplify it in staff training, you see a behavior, and you say it. See it and say it. And I like this image on the slide, because you can see that there's a person holding a camera and they're taking a snapshot of someone. That's what it does. For the person who struggles socially, they don't know which of their behaviors were the better ones or the less helpful ones, all day long. So when an adult, a caregiver says, you were so flexible there, awesome job, or you two worked it out, we've just taken a snapshot of it. We let them know that was a helpful behavior, right? So huge benefits. And this actually comes out of the child-centered therapy and person-centered therapy practice, going all the way back to Carl Rogers, reflective listening, and provides deep empathy, and the person feels like you're really with them. So you're going to reflect social behavior, their coping efforts. Wow, you stayed so calm that time. You worked it out. Great job taking a break. You played your escape card, right? Boom. All these things that we're now talking about can become comments that staff can give. So it's not just great play, which you still can do when they're playing sports, or, what a beautiful piece of art that you made. Yes, you can still give those kind of praise, but we're talking about these social moments. Work habits. You stuck with it. Oh, you messed up 3 times and you kept working on it. That's a huge skill to be able to persevere, right? Perseverance. So comment on that. Sticking with something when it's harder, when there's a mess up. And then the last bullet point, sort of unexpected, but you can really give them credit for the decisions that they make. And you can say, oh, okay, nice choice. You chose, that was a good decision. You changed your mind. Oh, first you were about to do blah, 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 but I could see that you changed your mind and you did this helpful thing. That was helpful. So TPR, everyone, number one most powerful skill. And this can take a lot of practice, because again, it feels weird at first, but then with a little practice, you really can do it. And you can see, actually, it's an investment, because you're giving a little bit of constant energy to giving TPR all day, but instead it saves all the back end meltdown stuff when kids are really more engaged, they're feeling better about themselves, and they're pulling harder to do all the do rules, all the positive rules that you set out. So that's the R, that's the reinforcement, right? And so TPR, number one answer. And then you can always overlay on top of TPR. You can be like, all right, if we get like 10 TPRs in this morning, you can do blah, blah, blah. You get the special thing at lunch, or you can do the special thing after lunch. If it's in the afternoon, you get the special evening privilege, that kind of thing. If it's at overnight camp, day camp, you can also work in special bonuses and benefits based on how much TPR they get. All right. But then, so now we're souping up the kids to be, and your whole bunk is like this positive social fighting force for good, right? Everyone's like, they're paddling in the same direction because of all this TPR. But still, kids are kids. All kids are going to make social mistakes. And of course, kids with social challenges are going to make more. So here's where, when it's time to coach them, we do not want to grind them to a pulp with all that perpendicular correction. So compassionate social coaching and problem solving. And I nicknamed this Jeopardy coaching, like our dear departed friend, Alex Trebek on Jeopardy. The answer comes in question form. Why question form? So when you coach kids for social mess ups or conflicts, you want to ask them questions instead of all those perpendicular statements. And here's why. All right, let me go back to that old thing that I said. That was inappropriate. Say you're sorry. Okay. Counselor says that. That was not nice. Say you're sorry. So for one thing, the adult has now done the social cognition. The adult has done the thinking, right? The adult assessed that moment. They heard what was said, and they're the one who thought, that sounded unkind. That might have hurt the other person's feelings. So they've assessed it. The child hasn't. So they're doing that for the child. And then when you say you're sorry, now it's a command. And the child is reduced to just, well, do I obey or do I not obey? And then if the child is at all oppositional, they'll be like, no. Or they'll be like, fine, I'm sorry. But in question form, you give the child the gift of thinking through that social moment. It might take, 2 minutes instead of 1 minute. It might be a slightly longer process, but you can, so instead of that was inappropriate, say you're sorry, here's the script, right? Question form is, Sam, take a look at Emily's face right now. Question, does she look happy or sad right now? Unhappy. Okay, unhappy? Well, what can you do to help her get back to fun? Question, Sam thinks, what can I do? Well, Sam might come up with some kid level thing to make amends. And you go, all right, okay, do that. Sam might say, well, I could say I'm sorry and then invite them to play. And I'll be like, all right, yeah, go try that, right? Great thinking. So TPR, and you go right back to TPR, great thinking, targeted positive reflection. And then you watch, he makes a beeline, goes to Emily, does his business. The two go off skipping to go, get back to camp fun. And you go, Sam, great job. And you tell him exactly what he did that was so helpful. That is social coaching, question form. What just happened here? What can you do differently? What can the two of you do to get back to fun? How can the two of you work this out? Question. Now, this is not for hurting behaviors, this is not purely for that. That's sort of a different day. We can do a deeper dive in that another time. But on the sort of the everyday, the bulk of camp experiences, this is how you do it. Use question form as often as possible. Why? Because it's a gift to the child. You are really becoming a social skills facilitator as opposed to, that was inappropriate, say you're sorry, control and containment. Make sense? So that is the C, the compassionate social coaching in the ARCH. And that's a whole ball of skills to learn and practice as well. It deserves its own training. The staff training for my camp was 4 8-hour days. And some of it was, policy, HR, and payroll. But, we had hours upon hours because we were a special needs day camp. But you could add some small modules in these to your trainings if you wanted to. And let me know if you want any help setting that up. And let's get to the final piece as we go. I think we're right on time. So thing number 5 for supporting campers' frustration and anger, right? This is what you need to know about because this population has a lot more emotional surges. 0 to 60 emotionality. I mentioned there's a higher degree of anxiety in this population. And then also that can lead to more simmering and frustration, easier temper, and sometimes loss of control. So over the years and being frontline and firsthand with this population and having my therapist hat on, I started to recognize that parents and teachers and other people that were working with kids were intervening, were doing certain coping strategies or certain support strategies that really might make sense, but the timing was not right. and they flared the kids up. They were talking at times when the kids really couldn't handle talking. And so I was like, how can I show this to them? Okay. So it's really important to understand these different levels of frustration because if you intervene with the wrong support strategy at the wrong time or the right support strategy at the wrong time, you can escalate the situation. So I came up with this visual. This is how I teach social skills, these big flip chart pad papers. And so this is emotional GPS. For younger kids, we call it feelings GPS. And we have these 4 color-coded levels, phases. We have the purple phase, yellow, orange, and red. Red phase is meltdown. Meltdown is a loss of control. You can see the child has hijacked their brainstem, that bottom right here. If you take your finger and if you feel that the back of your head, there's your neck, and then it goes up to a notch in the back of your head, there is your brainstem. That's the same structure that's in other mammals, it's in reptiles, and that's the fight, flight, freeze reflex, right? Organism feels threatened and they're going to fight, or they might flee, run away, or they might play dead like a possum. Like, and some kids will put themselves to sleep, or they'll just like turtle up, they'll put a hoodie on, and they'll shut down. Fight, flight, and freeze. That's the red phase. Their insides and sometimes their outsides are out of their control. This could also appear with eloping, running away, flight, raging is sort of the common thing that people think about. And there's the shutdown piece. Silliness, out of control silliness, without listening, becoming dangerous. That's another example of red phase. So there's red phase. Okay. Orange, we're going to work backwards. Now, orange phase, they're not out of control, but here the child's starting to show they're heading that way. Their brainstem is beginning to wake up, and you'll be like, so you'll see sudden movements, guttural sounds. You might see their jaw muscles starting to pop. You know, they're clenching their jaw, their fists are balled up, they're stiffer. There could be crying. They're not out of control, but they're crying. They could have a head down on the desk beginning the sort of the pre-shutdown. Okay. And so that's what that looks like. The yellow phase is a lighter level, a milder level of frustration. Grr, something just went wrong. I don't like that. So something's hard. You don't like it, but the child still is in very good control. And we're going to talk about that and why that's important in a moment. And then the purple phase is where we're going with feelings GPS. We're always hoping to get back to purple phase, calm, they're relaxed. And when the child's in purple phase, they can play their best. They can be their best social self. They can learn the best. And their brilliant human brain is in charge. Not that brain stem that reptiles have, the reptilian brain, but their brilliant human brain that takes up their whole cranium is active, is in charge. Okay? And so there are things that we can do at each of these steps. And I want to point something else out before we come back to this, which is, so I made this is not drawn to scale, but you can see it across the bottom axis here. We have the purple phase, I call it zone, the purple phase, yellow phase, orange, and red. Okay. And the purple phase, when they're totally happy and calm, the adults can give less direction and less structure. Right. But the farther in they go, yellow phase, oh, now they need a little more activity. They need a little more support from the adult. Follow the black line to the right, orange phase, oh, now they need a little more support, a little more activity, and you have to be more directive. And red phase, they really need you to be very clear and directive. So that's just a visual to show, and I'll tell you why. And it's related to the blue and the green lines. When their brilliant human brain is in charge, in the purple phase, they're at a 9 and a 10. Man, life is good. And their brilliant human brain, whatever their developmental level is in charge. They have their maximum language ability, they have rational thought, such as it is, and then they can be more child directed, right? They can kind of play, they're following the rules, okay, right? But then as you get farther to the right, the yellow phase, watch what happens to their language ability and rational thought. It goes down. Orange phase, it's much lower, and red phase, they have almost no rational thought ability, and their language processing goes down too. And this is key. So let's go back to our chart here. Now, on the right side, it talks about your role, the adult's role in supporting. So in the purple phase, you can really be facilitative. The kids they're playing, they're doing camp, life is good. So you can use that Jeopardy social coaching, just open-ended questions. Hey, how do you want to handle that? What can you do about this? What do you want to do about that? Right? And you're giving TPR. Life is good. Yellow phase, their human brain, as you saw in that graph earlier, the human brain is still operational. And so if something goes wrong, oh man, you can still be facilitative and you can ask questions, Jeopardy social coaching. Hey, how do you want to handle this is a great question. What do you want to do about that? Oh, the kid's like, oh, I just messed up in my artwork. Hey, how do you want to handle that? How could you fix that? Question form, great. It's wide open because their mind can still be in this great problem solving mode. But now you get to orange phase. Now watch the camper. Camper's like, there's a stomp. Maybe there's a pound on a table if there's a table around. Maybe they're kicking something. Not out of control, but they're getting there. At that point, they're losing rational ability. They're losing language processing. So if you come in there wide open and be like, hey, how do you want to handle this? Or if you're trying to convince them, if you calm down now, we can finish this great activity and blah, blah, blah. Too much language will escalate the child, the neurodiverse child, more often than not. This is critical for staff to know. At this moment, when the child gets guttural, those early signs of orange phase, now the language shifts. Less language, and you say, okay, hold on. I'm not saying we have to do this now. Let's say there was a demand. Okay, time to go clean the bunk or whatever, something like that. Okay, pause. I'm not saying we have to do this now. We're going to take a break from that, right? So back off of the demand or expectation. Really important because the child's beginning to feel like sort of a cornered tiger, right? So now they're going to be defensive. But if you back that off, whatever, and you're not going to be lecturing and suggesting things, okay, that alone is going to help them, get back from the brink. And then you might offer just two acceptable coping choices. So remember, in yellow phase, it was wide open. How do you want to handle this? They could go any direction. Orange phase, then you go, okay, well, we could take a break here, or maybe we could go to the cafeteria and get a snack. What would be good for you? So you can offer two things that are acceptable, that'll work, and see what they say. Pause the demand and expectation of whatever's happening. Don't try to push them at that point to do something or to talk, and then perhaps give them a couple of things that will help them to calm. And don't try to process whatever the issue was until their face and voice sound like they're back in yellow and purple. And they'll give you the cue. They'll be like, hey, what's for dinner? Like they'll ask some very neutral thing, all right. And then the red phase, we don't have time to really go all the way into a coping safety plan now, but I'll point to it. I'll name it. So if we're now sort of like in this funnel and, orange phase, there was less language and less choice. Red phase, you're now at the bottom point of a funnel. And there should not be talking, almost no talking. Child can't process it. Too much of you, too much eye contact might inflame the child even. So you're there. Here's your message. Okay, you're really upset. Your only job is to calm down. I'll be right here. And then I back off and I'll get about maybe like 10 feet away, and I might even make myself small. I might kneel down so I'm not as threatening. And I'm not going to stare down the child and sort of watch them intently because my eye contact might stress them out. I might look this way and I can keep an eye on their safety with my peripheral vision. Just backing off. Your only job is to calm down. And in the red phase, my last message for you for today that we have time for is there's nothing that you can do to calm the child down. Rubbing their back, standing on your head, trying to distract them. Once the red phase kicks in, that's called the limbic wave. That part of the brain is activated, fight, flight, and freeze. And it's like a wave on the ocean. It has to rise, it has to crash on the shore, and then it recedes. And it will recede. The child always calms down. Nothing the child says during the red phase, during a meltdown, is personal because it's the dumbest part of their brain. That reptilian brain is what's talking. So they might say, "You're the worst. I hate you. This is the worst camp." They might say all sorts of hateful things. But if you ask them 15 minutes after the meltdown ends, they go, "No, I didn't mean that. I was just angry." So don't take anything personally, okay? And you just have to wait it out and just keep them safe. If they melt down in a room, in an activity, and if they're throwing things, if they're being dangerous, you have to clear the room. And the other kids can take their whatever they're working on outside. And if the child locks up, don't try to move them or force them. They stay put. Okay. If you can say, hey, come on, let's go escape. If they're willing to get up on their feet and then move with you, the group can stay and they can leave. But just know, sometimes in red phase they might lock up and you might have to clear the room. Um, and then that's what we have time to talk about today. You're really upset. Your only job is to calm down. I'll be right here. So you back off, give them space, and they'll signal to you when they're ready to engage. And the one thing that you can do to help yourself during this time is to breathe, because when they're raging, their breath is like right. So there's hyperventilation, there's panting, there's like all that sort of ragey breathing, which is fast, and you can really get sucked into that also, and your rate will pick up because of your mirror neurons in your nervous system. So if you intentionally breathe, or your staff, whoever you're coaching, all right, so you're breathing. Don't tell them take deep breaths. They're going to say, "Shut up, that's stupid," because that's their reptilian brains talking. But um, but if you are just non-verbally, just taking your deep breaths loudly, at some point their nervous system will start to pick up your slowness, and non-verbally you might help them slow down and start to regain calm. So that's all we have time for on that topic today. And one more note: if you happen to be a special needs day camp and work with kids who melt down, my program discovered this um, a crisis safety approach called ukiru, which is Japanese for to receive. And unlike other sort of the industry standard for decades was restraint, physical restraint for children, and that sort of a thing. Um, and then we never wanted to lay hands on a child. We found Ukiru. It has these bright, these sort of powder blue blocking pads, and it's this super gentle way to allow kids to aggress, get their rage out in red phase. And we actually, prior to our using Ukiru for the last 3 years of my program, we would have between like 4 and maybe 10 restraints actually in a year when things got really unsafe. Someone was running towards traffic or someone was trying to like really attack someone. Um, Once we got Ukiru, we never had a single restraint. So game changer. So if you happen to have that population, it's called the Ukiru program. And that's see on in the right picture, Grafton. That's a residential program in Virginia that developed it. It's legit. It's really an incredible program, and definite plug for that if you happen to work with this population that it actively melts down dangerously. So we need to head towards wrapping up. Thanks for being with me. So we talked about the negative cycles that neurodiverse kids are in. There's a name for it. It's ableism. But we want to create these positive cycles where they're accepted, where they're seen for who they are, right? So we talked about the ARCH method as a method of doing that. First, creating the structure that's going to help their brains understand the social expectations, where they are, what's happening next, right? So that alone is going to take let's take a level of that anxiety away. So that's the structure piece. Then we talked about the R in the ARCH, which is the positive cycles, undoing the um, the effects of ableism and the negative cycles, right? TPR. We talked about compassionate social coaching in question form, and then coping with strong feelings. I named, the emotional GPS. And each of these skill areas I mentioned in our staff training, it was hours upon hours. And I whittled them down into 3 small 2-hour webinars that I want to invite you to, your staff, anyone. And I have special offers also for the future on these. So each of these is 3 hours. And in May, so if you want to send any critical leaders to these to build yourselves up, it's $60 for one class, and there's discounts for multiple classes. And so class number 1 is all about really learning and practicing doing a deep dive in TPR and how to avoid getting sucked into negative cycles. How can you use the TPR framework even when a child tries to be like, you're the worst, I hate you? What do you do about that? You can't TPR them. And if you do compassionate social coaching, why are you saying that to me? So there's ways to do that. So this is creating that ultra positive culture. Okay. So that's class number one. How to give directions in a way that increases cooperation and decreases power struggle. So there's all these sort of nitty gritty positive cycle skills in class number one, if that should interest you. Class number two is a deep dive, 2 hours in learning all the different scripts for questions in social coaching, all different scenarios. We also sort of go underneath the surface and be like, I'm going to share with you what are some of the underlying cognitive gaps that the kids have? Why do they act the way they do? What are they missing? And that can actually help your staff learn what to say in social coaching related to flexibility or um, prolonged egocentrism, wanting to get their way. How can we teach them big picture things that will help them to not act in that way? So there's some things that you can do in class number two in terms of coaching the difficult moments. Okay, and then class number three, which is in these are all in May, 21st through 23rd, different installments. This is the deep dive into emotional GPS, where we can get into all of the coping, the support strategies for the yellow phase, orange phase, and there we can totally unpack what happens when there's a meltdown, how you can really support that. So we have those three classes. Each one is 2 hours. We've got bulk discounts. Okay, and then lastly, a couple of other ways that I can support you is I am, as I mentioned, moving into camp consultation services and coaching, and I have both an individual coaching. If you want to do a personal sort of audit of your program and explore what can we do and sort of problem solve together programs or interventions for your program, we can do that. We can review individual campers' needs and how you can meet them. So that's individual for our camp owners and directors. And I also have a mastermind coaching group that's opening. It's year long. We meet every month. So to plan for the camp year in the off season, and then during camp, we have weekly meetings. I'm available to meet weekly with whoever in the group wants to meet to talk about difficult scenarios, challenging camper moments, how to handle them, so I can support you in real time in the summer. So that's the mastermind coaching group. And so these are some services that I'm offering also. And finally, as I mentioned in my intro, if you want to summarize all the things that I've talked about and have it sort of in black and white permanently, is my social emotional guidebook. There's a QR code for that. So I can hang out a little longer and talk and answer any questions. This is a QR code to email me if you have any particular individual questions or needs. I'm happy to set up other times to talk. And so I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to stop sharing. And if anyone has any questions, if you want to hang out for a little longer, I'm happy to stay. I'm going to pull up the chat and oh, the QR code was broken. Thank you for telling me. I will hold on one moment. I can pull that up. I have some links that I can pop in there. So you can find my guidebook on Amazon for sure. My name is Michael Fogel, not Mike Fogel. So the Social Emotional Guidebook. And also here, I will throw up a few links for you as well in the chat. All right, boom. Let's see. Oh, those are those. So yeah, so certainly you can go on Amazon to find my guidebook. Uh, you're welcome. So glad you found it helpful. Absolutely. Um, yeah, so just go on Amazon if you want to, if you don't want to buy it direct from me. And yes, a question came in about will the recording be shared? Yes, that's the purpose of my recording it. So it will be shared. It's going to process today, and you'll get a link to it in an email, I believe, on Monday or so. So you can rewatch, and you'll have access to it for 30 days. Okay, I'm sort of going through. All right. Not seeing any other messages coming in. Yes, I'm so glad that you can see how you can use this in school. I am also a school consultant for neurodiversity. So yeah, right, here are some links for you.
Mike,
Yes.
thank you so much. I've come to experience some of your presentations in Casketor Academy.
Oh,
Um,
great.
I
Okay.
I run live. You're excellent live. One of the reasons why when somebody told me, "Do you know that Mike is doing this presentation for camps?" I'm like, "Wow! I heard about his Camp Pegasus. I want to come in." So the slides that you had, I do counselor training as I run camp every day. Is there any chance to share these slides? Number one, number two, um, the the three classes that you're giving. Is it the price for, let's say, me and I'm the head counselor and a camp director? We each should sign up for a separate registration, right?
If you are together in a room, I would, you can watch it together.
I
Um,
got it. If it's a two separate connections, it's two
yeah, if it's
separate
two
things.
separate connections, you should log in from different places.
I
And
figured out that.
yeah, and also if any of you wanted to do a full staff training or have me either Zoom into a staff training, there's different pricing for that. Those will be recorded. Those three webinars that are going to be live will be recorded as well, and then they'll be kind of permanent. And then there'll be a price for them if you want to pipe them into any staff training for larger groups.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for that, for the feedback, the positive feedback. I really appreciated it. And thanks to everyone who remains for joining us today. Really just a joy to share it. It's my passion. It's what I've been developing for 20 some years. And so thanks a lot. All right. Any other questions while we are together? I see about 8 people are still on the call with me. All right. Suzanne, thanks for that chat. I appreciate it. Yeah. All right. There's no other questions coming in. I think we will sign off. Everyone, if I don't see you, have a great summer, great camp experience, right? Rock on. And let me know if you have questions, if there's any way that I can support you and your campers this summer. All right. Take care, everyone. Until next time.